Continuing my Gangstalking story. Early on at the Grove, um, as I said, they continued with the high frequency noises and the vibrations, and then and they had done those stories about how I was allegedly planning to kill my father, and they were trying to do these fake lie detector tests. I remember one time like waking up on the couch, and I was like answering questions of theirs, and they were like, "No, but you said that you were going to kill your father and blah 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 blah." And I was like, "No, that's not the case." And one of the days, I felt like I was about to throw up, but I wasn't nauseous, and I felt like something was gripping me, or like around somewhere like in here, and then I felt like I was being pushed to the floor, and then it felt like both I was being pushed down by a force, and these things that they attack you with can literally feel like you're being pushed. They can push you to the side. I'm literally like being pushed forward sometimes, pushed to the side, and sometimes they do it like they go, "Oh, it's a wave pool," and they do like this thing where really it feels like I'm in a wave pool where like water's like woof, doing like this because they're pushing me from side to side. And one day when I was pushed to the floor, and then they joked about how they Swiffered the apartment with me, and they basically made me like inch around like a worm to various parts to like from one bedroom to the other bedroom, and then I looked up and it was daylight, but I had curtains drawn, and it was kind of dimly lit inside, and I looked up and it looked like there were like these holograms with like wands of like doing like this. It was really weird. And they said that like Jason was there from Studio 6, and then Micah was there, and like he was going to kill my father, and they did all that whole story. I think I already did a video of that. And then one day they did this thing where Cindy Eck from Capital Credit Union was doing like the story, and it was kind of based on something that I think she had done at the credit union one time around Christmas time or New Year's, and they did like the spiel where I was like the audience participant, and they were speaking through me, and it was quite funny. And then I found myself in the shower, and then I felt like my hand being pushed down to my crotch, like washing my crotch with a loofah, and then I was like, "Cindy, what are you doing with your hand?" And then they pretended that Nicki Minaj jumped into my body, and all of a sudden I was like going, "Honey, honey, 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 honey," and stuff like that. And I thought it was like Rudy pretending to be Nicki Minaj jumping into my body. And it was kind of neat. And they kept trying to push me out of the apartment naked. And I was like, "I'm not going outside naked. It's weird." And then one day, several weeks later, they were doing this whole another spiel, this whole another story time narrative. And I felt like almost like I was in a trance. And I was playing a part in this narrative. And there was like this roller coaster experience ride or something like that. And all these other people were there to join me. And then all of a sudden I found myself walking outside naked. And I caught myself. And I was like, "Oh." And I walked back, and I missed my door. And I went to the building, and I walked back inside. Now, the moment I wasn't outside I was probably outside for like a minute. The moment I walked back inside, I already saw Gavin with APD officers coming around the corner. And I was like, "What the fuck?" And I was severely dehydrated all of a sudden. And then it almost felt like my body had been taken over, and they were speaking through me still. And they were going, "We played a joke on Kip. We played a joke on Kip." And I was like, "Who the fuck played a joke on me?" And I was dehydrated, and one officer had a Sprite, and they were like, "He needs a Sprite. He needs a Sprite." And they joke about that because my cat's name is Sprite, and she wasn't with me at the time. And they're like, "We'll put some shorts on." And I did. And they were like, "Give him the goddamn Sprite." And then I found myself, I was on my balcony on the first floor, and all of a sudden I was leaping over the balcony, and then I was being like pinned down on the ground, and then being forcibly sedated. And the EMT lied in his report and said that like I threatened to kill them or threatened death or something like that. And I would never do something like that. I was taken to a hospital, and I was released the next day. And in both cases, I was separated from Max. In one case, like Max had gotten loose, the door had been open, the first one, And the second one, I don't know if he was put in the pound or if someone from the apartment office had been looking after him. I can't remember. I think some people from the crisis team had come over and had retrieved him. So I think Gavin had been looking after him, allegedly. Or maybe the cop that showed me a picture of a dog that looked just like my dog and said that he had a dog that looked just like my dog. I'm not really sure about that, but we'll find out. And the harassment just continued. And, then the incident happened where my dog was kidnapped out of my apartment. And I already did a video on that. And so the whole time at the Grove, they were doing like story time, and they were doing, everyone was on a soundboard. Cindy was on the soundboard. Terry McCoy from Capital Credit Union was on the soundboard. Brian Duchamp was on the soundboard. They had his laugh. Clay was on the soundboard. Jennifer Moore. And eventually Lisa Molosky, she came much later for some reason. And Rudy was on the soundboard. Rudy Colazzo. Brian Duchamp. And I was just confused. I didn't know what the fuck was going on. I found myself in several instances like walking around, and in one case, in another instance, I was walking, and I was letting them talk through me again, and they were like, "You know what you need, Kip?" They're like, these guys like joke about putting your ass up and jolting you and making you hump the bed, because sometimes they would get me. I'd be in the bed naked, and they would jolt me in a way that looked like it was humping the bed, and they would joke about it, and they pretended like I was on some onion link with the video being broadcast to like my neighbors, and it was really embarrassing. And they were like, we're gonna get you, like, this is bullshit, and we're like on the crew, and we're gonna like leave. And I'm walking down like man shack, and then I walked down to the 7-Eleven, and eventually there were some cops there like asking me questions because I was talking to myself. And then I was with the cops inside 7-Eleven, and I was like, fine, I'm just here to buy a drink. And like they watched me buy it with the debit card. And when I was talking to them, they were talking through me, and they're like, I'm the guy driving the guy. I'm the guy that talked to you outside. This is the guy that we've been fucking with for like years. And they did that. And I was walking around again, and then I get picked up, and I didn't realize at the time they picked me up on a public intoxication, and I wasn't on anything. And they took me to Travis County Jail downtown, and I got moved 3 times from one cell to another cell, which I don't know why, and then from another cell to a padded cell that didn't have a water fountain in it. From the first 2 cells, they pretended like there was some game show. And I was looking at the warped mirror. They have like these mirrors that are shaped like this, that are like bolted to the wall. And I felt like Aaron Hilton was talking to me through me. And I was like, hey, Kip. And he's like, it's Aaron. It's Aaron. Oh my God, Kip. Oh my God. We've been like watching the whole thing. Like, oh my God. And they pretended like it was like this like reality show quiz moment where you had to get like 5 stars, like on Candy Crush or something, instead of 3, like 5 stars, like doo, 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 bling, and they even did sound effects with it. And I would really like to get the footage from those cells. And I was mesmerized. And then they started zapping my feet in the second cell. I was like, I was literally like jumping off the ground because they were zapping my feet so hard. And then they put me in a third cell. In the third cell, there was this white officer and a black female officer, a white male officer and a black female officer that kept coming to my cell. And I kept saying, I need water. They kept dehydrating me. They were zapping me with something. I just felt like my whole mouth go dry. And it felt like there was like this heat all over my body. I felt like I was being burned. And I kept buzzing them, and I was like, I need water. And they gave me like 2 little tiny Dixie cups, like itty bitty ones, like with some water in there. But then like I was in the cell for like, I think an hour at least. And I was like, I need water. And one time the white officer came over there, and he was like, well, where's your cup? And I was like, there's a hole in it. Like, I need water. Give me water. And he just like smirked. And the black female officer came over, and like at least one time she acted like she was like ticking something off, almost like they were recording the times that they weren't giving me water, and I didn't understand it. And then a female officer came in with 1 or 2 male officers, a white female officer, and then I started seizing up. Like my muscles felt like they were being, like they were cramping up, and they handcuffed me, they put handcuffs on me, and then she drove me pretty recklessly to Dallas Seaton where I was there. And she kept telling me that they were going to take the cuffs off. I was so dehydrated that I literally had to put my head in a sink that had like an auto turn on where you wash your hands. I literally had to put my head in there and get water. And she kept saying she was going to take the cuffs off me, and my arm kept like cramping up on me. And I was like, I was like, oh, she wanted to take my blood pressure. And I was like, I was like, if you take the cuffs off, you can take my blood pressure, but you're not taking my blood pressure with my hands behind my back. I don't like that blood pressure thing. And then they came in, forcibly sedated me. And right before they forcibly sedated me, I went like that. And I heard my kippy whistle, which is like this wooden whistle. It's like, this long, and it's got like 4 little holes at the end of it. It's like a little choo-choo train whistle that had like kippy on it from when I was a kid. And they showed me a graphic of that. And I heard that come out of me. I was like, what? And then like a whole group of like medical staff and officers like did this and sedated me. And I've been forcibly sedated several times, and it is not pleasant. It is so violating. And I woke up that night, and they kept trying to make me think I was in the hospital for longer because the checkout date says that I was there for like 3 days. And I wasn't. I was there just till the night, and then I checked myself out that night, and I left. And that whole time at the Grove too, they kept joking about IVs. Who are you going to get an IV? You're going to get an IV. And all of a sudden I tested for neurosyphilis, and I still to this day don't know if I had it. I still treated for it the next year. I went through 2 weeks of IV antibiotics, but I believe that my results were tampered with, possibly, or at least that they used that as an excuse, as he may have that, so that other people like my dad and Tom shouldn't have told my dad, and I told him not to. I'm so disappointed in him for doing that, so that they would think that there was a reason for the shit that I was going through. And neurosyphilis takes decades for symptoms like that to occur, and it can't explain everything anyway, and I treated for it anyway. But it was something that had been teasing me with the whole year, just like with my medical records that were released. And one time I went to my doctor's office, and this is before the stabbing incident. This is the time before the stabbing incident, like a month before the stabbing incident that happened. And I was like, I didn't know what's going on, and I was like looking through video footage, and my doctor came in. He was like, "Oh, do you have an overlay on that? Like the footage looks weird." I'm like, "I know it looks weird because this projection nonsense." The overlay was a buzzword. He didn't say filter, artistic filter, or something like that, artistic effect. He said overlay, and he also mentioned bees and infrared. And around that whole week before, they kept going buzz, buzz, and they kept projecting bees in the foliage, and they were like, "It's a sting operation. It's the Vice Squad. You're gonna get stung." That same day that I came back from the doctor's office after going to the pretrial and meeting with my lawyer, there's a dead bee in my bathmat, like right in the middle of my apartment. My apartment had been left unlocked. And so I know, I'm pretty sure someone placed it there. I do not believe that a single bee floated, went into the middle of my apartment bathroom and like landed right on my bathmat and just died there. That didn't happen. So that's disappointing that someone did that. I don't know, it was Gavin or the guy that had stayed over the night before, who had heard the voices, and when they were calling me faggot at Studio 6. But all that time, it was just crazy. And the zapping like increased. They started zapping my feet. They were like, "Lift your feet off the floor," and then like obviously I wouldn't lift my feet off the floor, and then all of a sudden like my feet would get zapped to the point like I literally would like jump up and down. And that's when I would like go out to the balcony, and just like, after a week of this, I would just scream at the foliage, and then sometimes there'd be noise complaints, and it's like I don't know who to go after because I don't know where these people are. And half the time the police would come in there, and like early on, there was one time, and it was hardwood floors, and it was high frequency noises and vibrations, and I didn't mention the voices because I didn't want them to like say, "Oh, he's just schizophrenic," which is kind of funny. Like you mentioned that people are like, "Oh, just schizophrenia." Schizophrenia is not some all-encompassing thing that includes fibromyalgia, neuropathy, epileptic seizures, migraines, vertigo, nausea, electrocution. Like it's not all encompassing of that. And I know that they pick on people that are already schizophrenic because I've met people that were schizophrenic both in jail and out of jail that were going through the same thing to varying degrees. And early on, when I called the cops one time, I made a 311 call, and they responded, and their officers like laughing behind the other officer. I was holding Max at my doorstep, and I calmly said, and I was just trying to explain to him, I was like, look, I'm new here, but I've been here 3 months. I know what the air blower sounds like and feels like with the hardwood floors. I know what the refrigerator sounds like and feels like. And I know what the outside air compressor sounds like and feels like. I've been here 3 months. I know what the appliances sound like and feel like through the floors. I know my sounds. I know my vibrations. I've settled in now. This is something different, and there's an intent behind it. And he smirked at me and he laughed and he was like, "Let me get this straight." That's basically what I said to him, almost verbatim. And he goes, "Let me get this straight. You talk to your refrigerator?" And I was like, nothing that I just said described anything like me talking to my refrigerator or me hearing like the refrigerator talk to me. I simply was letting him know that I knew about the sounds and the vibrations emitted by the air blower, the air condenser outside, and the refrigerator, which has a condenser on it. And I was like, this is something different, and there's intent behind it. And he was, "You talk to your refrigerator?" So that asshole's either in on it or he just doesn't know how to deal with crazy people. And it's like, what I was describing was not crazy. Like, nothing that I was describing should have been a mental illness. I didn't even know about that public intoxication charge until I got out of the hospital and I checked myself out. And then on one of the calls near the end of my stay at the Grove, it was like the second to last call that was made. There was a white officer, and he just continued walking around the property. And then a Hispanic officer, a very attractive male Hispanic officer, sat there and talked to me. He was smiling with me the whole time. And he was like, "I have a dog that looks just like your dog." And I've been separated from Max. And he may very well have a dog that looks just like my dog. But Max is a very unique looking dog. He's not a unique breed. There's lots of Boston Terrier pug mixes that are called Bugs, Buggs. But he showed me a picture, and it looked like someone had put a different collar on Max, and it looked exactly like Max. So that's something that needs to be followed upon as well. That sounds paranoid, but it's something that's very easy to look into. And if he doesn't have a dog that looks just like my dog, I mean, I was separated several times by the police from my dog forcibly, then like, what the fuck? So I guess that wraps it up for the Grove. And there's one time time of the Grove too, where they separated me from my dog again, and I was being zapped in the back of the police car that took me to the psychiatric mental health facility. The old, I don't know if it's still. I've been there one time before, and it took me 2 hours to wait for a doctor, and then he saw me for like 2 minutes, and then he released me, and I had to wait the next day until like, I don't know, 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. to go get my dog out of the fucking pound. And I even told them, I was like, "I got food and water there for overnight." He's like, "No, we still got to wait for the pound." And I was waiting in the car for like 30 minutes, it seemed like, or 45 minutes, just getting zapped and dehydrated. And they're like, "We're going to make it seem like you're sweaty and like you're on meth and we get you agitated." And so my stay at the Grove lasted till July, I believe. And then I went to, and around that same time also, I looked up George Longoria, my former best friend, who had heard me talk behind his voice on a soundboard behind his back, which I wasn't. But he truly did hear it, and I didn't know it until I was going through it. I believe I could be paranoia, but I believe that they went on next door and added George Longoria to a place off of Manchek called Victory Road or Victory Lane. And around that same time, at my doctor's office, the medical assistant's name was Victor. I'm not saying that there's anything connecting them, but they like to create some coincidences, and then they like to harp on other coincidences to make people paranoid. And like I found like this ball with an 8 on it, drawn on it, and then they made an 8-ball reference all the time, and which is a drug reference, and a pool ball reference. And then my sister showed up one time when I got to the Wood Spring a few weeks later after I lost my house, and she visited me, and she had a black shirt with like a little 8 on it, like an 8-ball shirt. And they're like, "Oh, your sister's in on it." Ah. And but with the Victor thing, when I also went to the Wood Spring, and a friend of a friend visited, and his name was Victor. And across the highway was Victor Road, over near the Whataburger Breaker and IH-35, the Wood Spring there. I made a big deal about that. And then, like, when I took a road trip after all that in September, and I found myself in Houston, I was being prayed to by a black church with the van of black guys. And they were like, one guy was holding my hand and praying, and he was like praying for a victory for me. And they're making a big deal about that. So I think some of that was fabricated. I believe that they made up George. I don't think there was a George Longoria, could be wrong, that lived off of Victory Road or Victory Lane, off of Manchac. I think they added him since George is my best friend. And I went to go by there to visit, and he wasn't there, obviously, because he didn't live there. And he never lived there. And I believe they also subliminally suggested to my dad to pick the Wood Spring up at 35. And then the other coincidence is that I used to live on Tower Trail when I had my house. And then the second to last incident that happened when I was at the house in Manor, there's a Tower Road, which they took me to wait for the paramedics when I was being zapped. And I know, and I'm pretty sure they knew I was being zapped, because I literally was brought to my knees like I was having an epileptic seizure, and they weren't treating me like someone that was having an epileptic seizure. They were treating me like shit, and they were joking around with me. But that's basically my stay at the Grove and a little bit at the Wood Spring. So that was the nightmare of more than half of 2017.